I woke with a raw throat and blinding stomach cramps. Instead of a panicked family, my tanned, irritated mother stood at the billing desk, treating my hospital room like an inconvenient layover. Then the nurse printed the visitor log. One name appeared for 7 straight nights. It was the name my mother spent my childhood cursing. Knowing who sat in that dark hallway proved my family did not just abandon me. They stole my entire life. My name is Gabriella Wheeler. I am 34 years old. Waking up feels like swallowing crushed glass. The pain hits long before my eyes open. It is a vicious, burning sensation dragging its claws up my stomach and settling deep inside my chest. My breath hitches. A sharp mechanical beep answers my gasp. The air smells like bleach and sterile cotton. My brain is wrapped in thick, heavy fog. I try to piece together the last thing I remember. A fluorescent office light. The taste of copper in my mouth. The floor rushing up to meet my face. After that, there is nothing but white noise. I pry my eyelids apart. The harsh lighting of the intensive care unit assaults my vision. Tubes snake across my arms. A monitor glows to my left. I swallow against the sandpaper dryness in my throat and slowly turn my head to the right. There is a cheap vinyl chair pushed against the wall. I expect to see my mother sitting there with her arms crossed. I expect to see my father scrolling on his phone. I even expect to see my younger brother Mason complaining about the hospital coffee. Instead, the chair is empty. The absolute stillness of that empty seat is brutal. It feels louder than the machines keeping watch over my failing body. The door creaks open. A nurse walks in. Her badge reads, Talia Beck. She has dark bags under her eyes, but her smile is soft. She checks my intravenous drip and notes the sudden spike in my heart rate on the monitor. You are awake, she says softly. Try not to move too fast, Gabriella. My voice is a cracked whisper. What happened? Talia pauses her charting. She steps closer to the bed. You collapsed at work, she explains. Severe gastric hemorrhaging. You lost a dangerous amount of blood. The doctor said your body basically shut down from chronic stress and exhaustion. You were very close to not making it. I stare at the ceiling tiles. Gastric hemorrhaging. A bleeding ulcer that I ignored for months because I had deadlines to meet and family bills to pay. Where are they, I ask. The question tastes pathetic on my tongue, but I have to ask it. Where is my family? Talia looks down at her tablet. Her gentle demeanor tightens. She refuses to meet my eyes right away. That tells me everything I need to know before she even speaks. They were here, Talia says. Yesterday morning. For how long, I ask. Maybe 20 minutes, she replies softly. They spoke to the attending physician. They asked if you were stable. Then your mother asked for the social worker to ensure your corporate insurance was covering the emergency admission. After that, they said they had a flight they could not miss. A flight they could not miss. The words echo in the sterile room. I close my eyes. I know exactly what flight it is. Cancun, a luxury beach resort in Mexico. Mason has been talking about it for 6 months. He is launching a high-end travel startup that has zero revenue and a bloated business plan. He managed to secure a meeting with a potential investor vacationing in Cancun. My parents insisted on flying down with him to present a united, successful family front. I almost bled to death on my office floor, and my family only cared if I was stable enough not to ruin their itinerary. The physical pain in my chest is nothing compared to the violent, sickening twist in my gut. They did not cancel. They did not stay by my side. They packed their resort wear and boarded a plane while I lay unconscious with tubes breathing for me. I am just a resource to them, a machine that pays the bills. As long as the machine is not completely broken, they can stick to their schedule. The next 48 hours blur together in a haze of pain medication and liquid diets. But as the fog in my head clears, I start to notice things. Small things. On the dawn of my 3rd day awake, I find a new braided phone charger plugged into the wall right beside my bed. My old one was frayed and left behind at the office. The next morning, there is a pair of thick, fluffy grip socks folded neatly on my tray table, replacing the scratchy hospital ones. On the 5th day, a cold bottle of my specific brand of electrolyte water sits waiting for me when I wake up. My family did not do this. My mother does not know my favorite brand of water. My father would never buy me a charger without complaining about the price. Mason would just steal mine. When Talia comes in to check my vitals that evening, I point to the water bottle. "Who brought this?" I ask. Talia smiles a tight, knowing smile. She adjusts my blood pressure cuff. "You have a very dedicated visitor," she says. I frown. "Ivy, my coworker." I ask. "No?" Talia shakes her head. "A woman. She comes every single night around 9 o'clock. She checks in at the front desk, but she never comes inside the room." My heart does a strange stutter. "What do you mean she never comes inside?" "She signs the log, and then she sits in the hallway," Talia explains, "right in that plastic chair by the viewing window. She stays for exactly 3 hours. She watches you sleep. She asks me if your stats are improving. She drops off those little care items, but whenever I tell her she can go in and hold your hand, she refuses. She says she does not want to cross a line or cause you any distress." A phantom chill runs down my spine. A woman sitting outside my room for 3 hours every night, watching over me, buying me things I actually need, protecting my space without demanding my attention. It is the exact opposite of how my family operates. My family demands everything and provides nothing. This stranger provides comfort and demands zero recognition. "What is her name?" I ask. Talia hesitates. "I am not supposed to give out visitor information unless you are the one authorizing the visit directly. But she is not a threat, Gabriella. She looks like she cares about you very much." The mystery gnaws at me. The days drag on. I am finally disconnected from the monitors. I am cleared for discharge on the 8th day. That same morning, my mother returns. Lydia Wheeler storms into the hospital lobby like she owns the building. She is deeply tanned, wearing a linen resort dress, and carrying a designer tote bag I paid the credit card bill for. She looks rested. She looks radiant. She looks completely unbothered by the fact that her daughter just spent a week cheating death. She marches up to the billing desk where I'm waiting in a wheelchair. She does not hug me. She does not ask about my pain. She immediately starts arguing with the administrative nurse about the discharge paperwork. I need to see the visitor log. My mother demands, slamming her hand on the counter. "I want to know exactly who has been in and out of my daughter's room while I was out of the country handling family business." The nurse raises an eyebrow, but prints out the sheet. She slides it across the desk. My mother snatches the paper. She scans the list. I watch her face. I watch the golden Cancun tan drain completely from her cheeks. Her manicured hands begin to shake. She stops breathing. She is staring at the exact same name repeated on the log. Night after night after night. 7 consecutive signatures. The name of the woman sitting in the dark hallway. My mother drops the paper. She looks terrified. And as I sit there in my wheelchair, looking at the absolute horror in my mother's eyes, I realize the game has changed forever. I live in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of St. Petersburg, Florida. The houses here look far more peaceful than they actually are. They have perfectly edged emerald lawns and smooth pastel stucco walls that expertly hide the humidity rot eating the wood frames from the inside out. It is a place where everything appears perfectly stable, as long as you do not look too closely or ask too many questions. That is exactly how my family operates. We are a beautifully painted facade, hiding a foundation that is actively collapsing under the weight of greed. Most of my waking hours belong to the North Harbor Relief Bureau. I am their senior audit coordinator. After every major hurricane sweeps through the Gulf Coast, destroying towns and ruining lives, my agency steps in to review emergency housing relief claims. It is a job that demands inhuman precision and endless stamina. People lie when they are desperate, and they lie even more when there is government relief money on the table. My dual monitors are constantly filled with mismatched property records, forged repair invoices, and highly suspicious wire transfers. I spend 12 to 14 hours a day hunting for discrepancies in the paperwork. I am highly paid to be cynical. I am paid to notice when the numbers do not add up. The irony is completely bitter to me now. I spent my entire professional career meticulously tracking down every stolen dollar for the state, while letting my own flesh and blood rob me blind in broad daylight. In the Wheeler household, there have always been two distinct roles. I am the responsible child. My younger brother Mason is the one with great potential. The boy with great potential is always allowed to fail because he is supposedly chasing greatness. The responsible child is never allowed to falter because she is the safety net for everyone else. Mason is always on the verge of his big magical breakthrough. His business ideas are grand and wildly expensive and entirely disconnected from economic reality. Yet my parents celebrate his every half-baked thought as if he just cured a terminal disease. When he decided to pivot from freelance app development to luxury travel vlogging, they threw a massive dinner party to celebrate his vision. When I got promoted to senior auditor, they sent a group text message with a simple congratulatory phrase. My mother Lydia orchestrates this toxic dynamic with absolute surgical precision. She never raises her voice or yells at me. She does not have to. She uses a sweet, concerned tone that makes you feel like you are the one breaking her fragile heart. When Mason needed the first and last month's rent for a downtown video studio, she called me on a Tuesday night. She sighed heavily into the phone receiver. She told me how hard Mason was trying and how the corporate world was so tough on young creative men. Then came the manipulative hook she always used. You are so much stronger than your brother Gabriella. You always figure things out. You have that steady, predictable paycheck. If he loses this studio space, his entire creative spirit will just shatter. You can manage this, right? Just to help him get on his feet. My father Grant uses a completely different weapon to get into my wallet. He weaponizes silence. If my mother is the sweet, crushing guilt, my father is the heavy, freezing weight of disappointment. When I hesitate to write a check, he simply stops looking at me. He leaves the room the second I enter. He speaks to me in clipped, single-syllable words. The temperature in our family home drops until I'm freezing to death in the middle of a hot Florida summer. He makes me feel small and pathetic. He makes me feel utterly selfish for wanting to keep the money I earned with my own sweat. To break his suffocating silence, I always have to buy my way back into his good graces. I have to apologize for hesitating, and then I hand over my credit card. The financial bleed was never a single fatal wound. It was a relentless series of tiny cuts. It was $3,000 for the studio deposit. It was $4,500 to clear my mother's secret department store credit card before my father found out about her shopping habit. It was a $1,200 premium for my father's car insurance because he conveniently forgot to pay it for 6 solid months. It was a new roof for their house. It was a massive grocery bill every single time they hosted a holiday dinner. Every request comes wrapped in the solemn promise that it is just a temporary loan. We will pay you back next month, Gabriella. Just until the new business takes off, Gabriella. The next month never comes. The business never takes off. If I actually sat down and tallied the total amount of money they have extracted from me over the last 10 years, the sheer size of the number would break my mind. But the money is only half the theft. The thing they drained from me was much larger than my bank account. They hollowed out my health, my sleep, and my self-respect. I stopped dating years ago because I could not explain to a partner why my savings account was always empty despite my senior-level salary. I stopped going on vacations. I stopped sleeping through the night. The chronic stress of keeping 3 grown adults afloat turned my stomach into a burning war zone. My self-worth eroded until I genuinely believed my only value as a human being was my ability to clear a family debt. On the rare occasions I found the courage to ask questions or push back, the retribution was swift and deeply disorienting. Last year I tried to say no to funding Mason's new digital marketing campaign. I told them I was mentally exhausted. I told them my rent was increasing by 15%. They did not apologize or show an ounce of empathy. They instantly twisted the narrative to turn me into the villain. My mother cried soft victim tears. My father shook his head and muttered about how corporate money had made me cold and calculating. "You are keeping score, Gabriella," my mother whispered while clutching her chest. "Family does not keep score. We gave you life and you are acting like a ruthless bank manager. You lack the capacity to sacrifice. You have lost your sense of family loyalty." By the end of the argument, I was the one apologizing to them. I wrote the check just to make the terrible feeling of being a bad daughter go away. They masterfully convinced me that setting myself on fire to keep them warm was the true definition of love. Every morning I put on my tailored blazer and drive to the North Harbor Relief Bureau to catch ruthless fraudsters. I act tough. I act legally untouchable. But the most terrifying truth is not out there in the world of corrupt contractors and fake disaster victims. The thing that was slowly killing me was right inside my own phone contacts. The real tragedy of my life is that when my exhausting office shift ends, I do not get to go home and rest. I just drive back to my own personal nightmare. I clock out of one demanding job only to resume my actual full-time role. A breathing automated teller machine for the exact people who are supposed to protect me. The chaos started when a Category 5 hurricane tore through the Panhandle. The storm surge swallowed entire coastal towns, leaving nothing but shattered wood and ruined lives in its wake. By the time the floodwaters finally receded, the North Harbor Relief Bureau was completely buried under an avalanche of emergency aid requests. The disaster brought out the absolute worst in humanity. Fraudulent claims multiplied overnight. Ghost contractors filed for imaginary debris removal. Fake property management groups submitted thousands of requests for roofs that never existed. I was working 16-hour shifts just to build a dam against the flood of stolen relief funds. My desk became my entire world. The harsh fluorescent lights buzzed a relentless rhythm against my skull from early morning until long past midnight. The air in the office always smelled like stale paper and burnt coffee. My daily routine devolved into whatever I could manage without looking away from my dual monitors. I drank cold, stale coffee from a cheap foam cup just to keep my eyes open. I chewed on dry salted crackers because it was the only thing I could digest while staring at endless spreadsheets. I kept a plastic bottle of generic pain relievers right next to my computer keyboard. Every 4 hours, I took 2 pills without even a sip of water. The dull, burning ache in my abdomen had been building for weeks, yet I ignored the warning signs completely. I kept convincing myself it was nothing more than acid reflux from my terrible diet. I told myself the pain was just the natural physical manifestation of carrying my family's massive financial burdens on my back. I firmly believed I did not have the time or the luxury to be sick. Ivy Sorrell sat at the workstation directly across from mine. She was the most ruthless investigator in our department and my closest ally in the office. Ivy had sharp, observant eyes that caught every single detail. She started noticing my physical deterioration long before I ever admitted it to myself. On a Tuesday afternoon, I pushed my office chair back to stand up and walk to the printer. My legs simply refused to hold my weight. I gripped the sharp edge of my desk so hard, my knuckles turned completely white. My vision swam dangerously for several long seconds. Ivy stopped typing immediately. She leaned over the low fabric partition separating our desks. "You look exactly like a ghost, Gabriella," she said softly. Her brow furrowed with deep concern. "Your hands are shaking violently. You need to log off right now and go home to sleep." I forced a stiff, unconvincing smile and shook my head. "I am totally fine, Ivy," I told her, waving off her worry. "I just stood up way too fast. I really need to finish this huge batch of vendor audits before 5 o'clock today." She did not believe a single word I said. "You have been living on cheap painkillers and sheer adrenaline for a solid month," she warned me. "Whatever massive problem you are running from is going to catch you if you do not stop and let your body breathe." I could not tell her the actual truth. I could not explain to my best work friend that if I took even one single sick day, the precarious house of cards I built for my family would completely collapse. The monthly mortgage on my parents' house would bounce. The expensive auto loans would default. Mason's endless extravagant expenses would go unpaid, and the resulting guilt trip from my mother would be infinitely worse than any physical pain I was currently enduring. I had to keep the machinery moving forward. I had to keep earning my salary to keep them happy. On a quiet Thursday evening, the office was mostly empty. The sun had already set, leaving the room cast in long, dark shadows. I was cross-referencing a massive batch of highly suspicious wire transfers linked to a newly registered disaster mitigation firm. The submitted paperwork was incredibly sloppy. The federal relief funds were being illegally routed away from actual rebuilding efforts, and funneled directly into a private limited liability company. I pulled up the official state business registry to find the managing director of this fraudulent shell company. The government website loaded slowly. The registered name appeared in bold black text across my bright screen. It was the exact name of Mason's brand new luxury travel startup. My exhausted brain simply flatlined. I stared at the bright letters until they blurred together into meaningless shapes. I desperately tried to convince myself it was just a massive random coincidence. But the registered business address perfectly matched a commercial studio property I had personally paid the security deposit for just 3 short months prior. My younger brother was not just wasting the money I gave him. He was actively siphoning federal disaster relief funds through a fake vendor account to fund his ridiculous beach resort pitches. The horrific realization hit my nervous system like a speeding freight train. A sudden violently sharp cramp ripped through my stomach, tearing away any illusion of simple stress. It was not a dull ache anymore. It felt like a jagged hunting knife twisting deep into my vital organs. I gasped incredibly loudly. The terrible sound echoed in the quiet, empty office. My hands flew to my stomach as I doubled over. I tried to stand up to reach the small plastic trash can, but the room suddenly spun completely out of control. The edges of my vision turned blindingly white. A high-pitched ringing sound entirely drowned out the low hum of the desktop computers. I felt a thick, hot metallic surge rise rapidly up my throat. It tasted heavily of old copper and bitter salt. I leaned over the side of my desk and violently vomited a massive amount of dark red blood directly onto the office carpet. I heard Ivy scream my name in absolute terror from across the room. Her heavy chair crashed backward as she sprinted toward me. My weak knees gave out completely. I hit the hard floor with a sickening thud. The coarse carpet scraped roughly against my pale cheek. I could not draw a single breath. My lungs spasmed violently as another dark wave of blood came up, soaking my white silk blouse. Ivy dropped to her knees right beside me, frantically pressing her trembling hands to my shoulders and screaming at the top of her lungs for someone to call an ambulance immediately. The blinding white light consumed everything else. My consciousness splintered into chaotic, broken fragments after that terrible moment. I faintly remember the jarring, bumpy motion of a rolling hospital stretcher. I remember the blinding red and blue emergency lights flashing intensely against the dark glass of the office windows. Inside the speeding ambulance, the sirens wailed a terrifying, desperate song. I was floating in a terrifying, freezing cold void, unable to move my limbs. I vaguely felt a heavy, agonizing pressure on my left arm. A frantic male paramedic was shouting urgent medical terms into a crackling radio. "Severe gastric hemorrhage," he yelled loudly over the screaming siren. "Blood pressure is dropping incredibly fast. Heart rate is highly erratic. She has severe anemia and clear signs of massive chronic stress. She let a bleeding stomach ulcer go completely untreated for way too long. We need 2 units of negative blood waiting at the trauma bay right now." I desperately tried to speak to tell him who to call, but my dry mouth would absolutely not move. I was quietly drowning inside my own failing body. The very next fragment of reality came much later in the night. I was lying totally flat in a hospital bed, hidden behind a thin, pale privacy curtain. The tearing abdominal pain was heavily muted by strong intravenous drugs, but I was entirely immobilized by exhaustion. The steady, rhythmic beep of a heart monitor securely anchored me to the sterile room. I heard confident footsteps approaching my medical bay. Then I heard the unmistakable, impatient voice of my mother. She did not sound hysterical or frightened. She did not sound anything like a loving mother who had just been notified her only daughter was rushed to the hospital coughing up pools of blood. She sounded deeply inconvenienced and highly annoyed. "Where is the attending physician?" my mother demanded sharply. Her expensive heels clicked aggressively against the hard linoleum floor. "I need to know her exact mental capacity right now. We have very important legal documents pending. How soon can she physically hold a pen to sign a guarantor form for a business loan?" A tired, frustrated male voice answered her demands. It was the emergency room doctor. "Ma'am, your daughter just lost 40% of her total blood volume. We had to perform an emergency endoscopy procedure to cauterize a ruptured major artery in her stomach. She is heavily sedated and currently in the intensive care unit. Signing any paperwork is absolutely out of the question for at least several days. There was a very heavy, tense pause. I lay there frozen behind the thin curtain, entirely unable to open my heavy eyes, praying to any listening God that my mother would finally drop her selfish facade and show just a single ounce of maternal panic. "Is she going to die tonight?" my father asked bluntly. His low voice was entirely flat and practically devoid of emotion. "Is she in immediate fatal danger right this exact second?" The doctor sighed heavily, clearly disgusted by their lack of empathy. "She is medically stable for the moment, but she needs critical, uninterrupted rest and very close observation." "Well, she is obviously in very good hands here," my mother said briskly without missing a beat. "Grant, we have to make a final decision right now. The flight board's in exactly 3 hours. We absolutely cannot delay this trip. Mason is at a defining moment of his entire life. If we do not show up to support his pitch in Cancun today, the wealthy investor will walk away forever. Gabriella is completely stable. The hospital machines are doing all the work. Staying here merely holding her hand will not magically change her medical charts." They did not even bother to ask to see me. They did not peek behind the privacy curtain to check if I was breathing. They spoke about me exactly like a broken household appliance that was already dropped off at the repair shop and forgotten. My younger brother needed them to secure lucrative funding for the very same company that I had just caught actively stealing federal disaster relief money. And my parents quickly chose the international flight. They enthusiastically chose the luxury tropical resort. They chose him just like they always did. Their confident footsteps quickly faded down the long, quiet hallway. The absolute silence they left behind was incredibly suffocating. I lay there trapped completely in a broken, failing shell of a body, realizing the absolute devastating depths of my own lifelong foolishness. Several lonely hours later, the quiet night nurse carefully placed my personal belongings in a clear plastic bag on the small rolling table next to my bed. My cell phone was sitting uselessly at the bottom of the transparent bag. Through the heavy, numbing fog of pain medication, I heard it buzz sharply with a brand new notification. The bright screen lit up suddenly, illuminating the dark, sterile hospital room. I forced my incredibly heavy eyes to focus on the glowing text message. It was a picture message sent directly from Mason. The colorful image showed a stunning panoramic view of a pristine Mexican beach, bathed in gorgeous golden sunlight. Crystal clear turquoise water gently lapped against perfectly white sand. A shiny silver ice bucket holding a very expensive bottle of champagne sat proudly on a teakwood table right in the foreground. Directly below the beautiful picture was a single line of typed text. "Wish you were conscious enough to see this view." The phone screen went completely dark, leaving me in total shadows. I slowly closed my eyes as the machine beside me diligently recorded the steady, broken rhythm of my ruined heart. The nights in the intensive care unit possess a very specific texture. They are heavy and thick. Once the frantic daytime rotation of specialists and technicians fades away, the ward descends into a cold, mechanical rhythm. The only sounds left are the rhythmic hiss of the oxygen lines and the steady electronic heartbeat pulsing from the monitor beside my bed. The lights in the corridor dim to a pale, bruised blue. It is during these hollow hours that the boundaries between reality and the narcotic haze begin to blur. On my second night alone, I noticed the shadow for the very first time. My room has a large viewing window facing the main hallway. The blinds are partially drawn, but a vertical strip of light cuts through the center. Around 9 o'clock, a tall, lean silhouette materializes behind the thick glass. It moves with complete, absolute silence. There are no heavy footsteps echoing on the linoleum. There is no frantic whispering to the nurses. The figure simply arrives and stands still. For a long time, I assume it is just another doctor reviewing my charts or a security guard doing rounds, but the shadow does not move on. It pulls up one of the stiff plastic waiting chairs and sits directly in my line of sight facing the window. The person does not rush into my room. They do not burst through the door weeping or playing the role of the distraught relative. They maintain a strict, respectful distance. They sit there for hours doing absolutely nothing but watching the slow rise and fall of my chest as if they need visual confirmation that I am still drawing breath. When morning comes, the chair is always empty. I ask Talia about it on the fourth day. She is checking the intravenous line delivering antibiotics into my bruised vein. The room is quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning. Someone was out there again last night, I say. My voice is still a fragile rasp. Talia pauses her work. She smooths the tape over my skin before meeting my gaze. Yes, she replies softly. They always come. They never miss a single night. Who are they, I ask. Talia busies herself with the digital monitor. They arrive exactly at 9 o'clock. They sign the security log at the front desk, and then they walk straight down here. Sometimes they stop me in the hall. They ask very precise questions about your medication schedule. They want to know your red blood cell count and if your iron levels are stabilizing. They ask about your follow-up appointments, but they never cross the line. They never use their presence to bully the staff into revealing more than we are legally allowed to share. They just listen, and then they sit by your window. Why do they not come inside, I ask. Talia shakes her head slowly. I offered, multiple times, but they refuse. They say they do not want to overwhelm you while your body is fighting so hard to heal. They just want to make sure you are not entirely alone. A strange tight knot forms in my chest. It is a completely foreign sensation. Nobody in my entire life has ever considered my emotional bandwidth before imposing themselves on me. My family views boundaries as personal insults. If my mother were here, she would be sitting on the edge of my bed, complaining about the cafeteria food and demanding I entertain her. This silent watcher operates on a completely different frequency. Then Talia drops the information that truly paralyzes me. You should also know something else, Gabriella. Talia lowers her voice, leaning closer to the bed. I am probably violating protocol by telling you this, but I think you need to know. The morning after your parents left for their flight, the billing department received a substantial wire transfer. I freeze. My heart rate monitor gives a sharp little spike. What kind of transfer? A payment, Talia whispers. A direct deposit covering your entire emergency room admission fee and a massive portion of your projected intensive care stay. I do not know the exact figures, but the administrative nurse told me it was easily over $20,000. It completely bypassed your corporate insurance deductibles. Panic instantly floods my veins. The cold hospital room suddenly feels suffocatingly hot. My mind races through every terrifying possibility. My family never pays for anything without an ironclad condition attached. If my mother or father authorized a payment of that magnitude, it meant they were buying the rights to my next 10 years of labor. It meant they had already calculated a way to extract double that amount from me the second I could walk again. They do not give money. They purchase leverage. Did my father authorize it, I ask? My breathing turns shallow and rapid. Did the transfer come from the Wheeler Family Trust? Talia firmly places her warm hand over my trembling fingers. No, she says clearly. The payment was totally anonymous. The benefactor legally requested that their name be completely wiped from the financial records, but the billing supervisor knows exactly who initiated the wire. It is the exact same person who sits outside your door every single night. The panic slowly morphs into deep, overwhelming confusion. I do not have a secret wealthy benefactor. I do not have friends who can casually drop tens of thousands of dollars on a medical bill without mentioning it. I have Ivy at the office who struggles to pay her own rent. I have a family who drains my accounts dry. There is absolutely no one in my universe who fits this description. Tell me their name, I beg. My grip on Talia's hand tightens. Please, Talia, I need to know who is out there. Talia gently pulls her hand away. Her eyes are deeply sympathetic but entirely resolute. I cannot do that, Gabriella. I really cannot. Whenever I push her for the identity, she expertly deflects the conversation back to my blood pressure or my oxygen saturation. It is incredibly obvious that she knows the name. It is also obvious that she believes speaking that name out loud will shatter the fragile peace of my hospital room. She guards the secret as if releasing it would irrevocably alter the entire trajectory of my life. So I wait. I lie in the quiet dark, and I wait for the sun to go down. The sixth night arrives with a heavy thunderstorm rolling off the Gulf. Rain lashes violently against the thick exterior windows of the ward. The thunder provides a low rumbling soundtrack to the isolation of the intensive care unit. At exactly 9 o'clock, the silhouette returns. Tonight, the corridor lights are slightly brighter. A janitor had propped open a supply closet door down the hall, spilling a wash of yellow light across the floor. The shadow steps into that spill of light before taking their usual seat. I hold my breath. I shift my sore body, agonizingly slowly to the left, propping myself up on one trembling elbow. The searing pain in my stomach flares wildly, but I ignore it. I focus entirely on the pane of glass. It is not a man. For days, my exhausted brain assumed the tall, imposing figure was a male doctor or an investigator. But as the person turns their head to look through the glass, I finally see the sharp profile of a woman. She is older. She is wearing a dark tailored trench coat over a high-necked blouse. Her posture is incredibly rigid and unyielding. She does not slump in the cheap plastic chair. She sits with the disciplined grace of someone who commands authority in every room she enters. Her hair is pulled back severely from her face. Even through the distorted glass, I can see the deep lines of exhaustion etched around her mouth. But her eyes are completely clear and fiercely resolute. She is staring directly at me. We are separated by 2 panes of thick glass and a set of heavy blinds. We are separated by a gulf of silence. But in that singular suspended moment, the air in the room suddenly feels electric. I do not know her face. I have never met this woman in my entire 34 years of life, yet looking at the strict, unyielding line of her jaw and the quiet, fierce way she guards my door, a strange, terrifying wave of familiarity washes over me. It is not a memory of a face. It is a memory of a feeling. It is the exact same feeling I had when I was a very young child, finding an old locked wooden box in the attic before my mother violently snatched it away. It feels like uncovering a buried secret. My arm feels like it is made of solid lead. The intravenous lines pull tight against my bruised skin, but I force my muscles to obey. Inch by agonizing inch, I lift my right hand up from the sterile white hospital blanket. I hold my palm flat in the air facing the window. It is a weak, pathetic gesture, an acknowledgement. Outside in the hallway, the woman stops breathing. I can see her shoulders stiffen. She stares at my raised hand for a long, stretching eternity. Then very slowly she tilts her head forward. She gives me a single brief nod. It is a minuscule movement, but the sheer weight behind that nod sends a violent physical chill cascading down my spine. The gesture is a silent promise. It is an anchor thrown into the dark water. I lower my hand back to the bed, completely exhausted but suddenly wide awake. I close my eyes and listen to the rain beating against the building, knowing with absolute certainty that the woman sitting in the dark hallway is the key to everything my family has ever stolen from me. By the morning of my 7th day in the ward, the heavy narcotic fog finally lifts from my brain. The sharp, agonizing pain in my abdomen has settled into a dull, manageable ache. For the first time since my collapse, I sit completely upright against the stiff hospital pillows. I drink the electrolyte water left on my tray. My mind is operating with crystal clarity. I am done waiting in the dark. I press the red call button taped to my bed rail. Talia arrives a few minutes later, holding a fresh bag of saline. I do not let her check my vitals. I look her directly in the eyes. I need a name, I tell her firmly. My voice is no longer a weak, broken rasp. It is steady and demanding. I am not asking you to break medical privacy laws, Talia. I am asking you to identify the person who just paid a massive hospital bill on my behalf. I am completely lucid, and I am explicitly authorizing you to tell me who has been sitting outside my door. Talia pauses. She looks at the monitors, and then back at my face. She sees the absolute resolve in my expression. She lets out a long, heavy sigh and lowers her hands. Her name is Lenora Price, Talia says quietly. The air leaves my lungs in one sudden violent rush. My fingers instantly grip the thin white bedsheet. The room seems to tilt dangerously on its axis. Lenora Price. That name is a ghost. It is a cursed word in the Wheeler household. I grew up with that name ringing in my ears like a warning siren. My mother used it as a weapon to explain every missing dollar and every family argument during my childhood. According to the toxic mythology, my mother relentlessly drilled into my brain Lenora Price was an absolute monster. She was described as a ruthless, greedy manipulator who spent years trying to sink her claws into my grandmother's estate. My mother painted her as a venomous outsider who wanted to destroy our family and steal everything the Wheelers owned. Whenever my mother wanted to justify a sudden move or a locked cabinet, she blamed the lingering threat of Lenora. My brain violently struggles to reconcile the two completely opposing images. How could a woman my mother described as a parasitic gold digger be the exact same person quietly paying a $20,000 medical bill? Why would a supposed enemy spend 7 consecutive nights sitting in a hard plastic chair just to ensure I was still breathing while my own flesh and blood drank champagne on a Mexican beach? The contradiction is entirely paralyzing. Ask her to come inside tonight, I tell Talia. My heart pounds heavily against my ribs. If she shows up at 9 in the evening, tell her I am awake and I want to see her. The remaining 12 hours of the day drag by with agonizing slowness. I stare at the wall clock, counting every single rotation of the minute hand. When the sky outside turns pitch black, the corridor lights dim to their usual bruised blue. At exactly 9 in the evening, the heavy wooden door to my room slowly clicks open. Lenora Price steps across the threshold. Up close, she is even more intimidating than she appeared through the viewing window. She is wearing a structured charcoal blazer and dark slacks. But despite her commanding physical presence, she stops immediately after taking 2 steps into the room. She stays firmly glued to the shadows near the doorway. She keeps a massive physical distance between us, as if she is terrified that moving any closer might shatter me into pieces. She stands there like a soldier who has waited years for a specific order and is terrified of ruining the fragile moment. We stare at each other in total silence. I expect her to launch into a dramatic emotional speech. I expect tears or apologies, or grand declarations. She offers none of those things. "You are awake," she states simply. Her voice is incredibly calm and completely devoid of pity. It is a low, steady register that instantly commands respect. I nod slowly. "How did you know I was here?" I ask. Lenora shifts her weight slightly but does not move closer to the bed. "I received a phone call from a woman named Ivy," she explains. "Your office emergency contact list was completely outdated. When you collapsed, Ivy panicked. She grabbed your purse to look for your family's phone numbers. Tucked behind your state driver license, she found an old worn-out business card with my direct phone number on it. She called me from the back of the ambulance." A sudden sharp memory pierces through my exhaustion. 4 months ago, I was cleaning out the attic in my parents' house. I found a heavy wooden box belonging to my late grandmother. It smelled exactly like dried lavender and old paper. Tucked inside the lid was a thick cream-colored business card bearing the name Lenora Price. I had barely held it in my hand for 10 seconds before my mother suddenly appeared in the doorway. She physically snatched the card right out of my fingers. Her face was twisted in absolute rage. She explicitly ordered me to never get involved with that dangerous woman. She threw the card into the trash. But later that night, driven by a strange rebellious instinct, I dug it out of the garbage and hid it in my wallet. I never called the number. I just kept it safely hidden away. "I found your card in my grandmother's old belongings." I admit quietly, "My mother told me you were a thief. She said you tried to ruin our family." A brief dark shadow crosses Lenora's face. It is not anger. It is deep, profound exhaustion. "Lydia Wheeler has spent a very long time constructing a highly elaborate fiction," she replies. "It is much easier to turn me into a monster than to explain the absolute truth of what she has done to you." Lenora slowly reaches into the inside pocket of her charcoal blazer. She pulls out a small stack of thick-aged envelopes, bound together by a simple rubber band. She takes exactly 3 measured steps forward and gently places the bundle on the edge of my rolling tray table. Then she immediately steps back to the doorway, maintaining her strict distance. I stare at the top envelope. The postage stamp is canceled and dated 8 years ago. But it is the handwriting that makes my throat close up entirely. It is a beautiful, sweeping cursive script perfectly slanted to the right. It is my grandmother's exact handwriting. The envelope is addressed directly to me. The top flap is securely sealed. It has never been opened. For the past decade, your mother convinced you that your grandmother abandoned you at the end of her life, Lenora says softly. She told you there were no letters. She told you there were no final messages. That was a calculated lie, Gabriella. I mailed these to your house every single month after she passed away. Your parents intercepted every single piece of correspondence before you could ever see it. My trembling fingers reach out and trace the faded ink of my own name. The sheer magnitude of the betrayal begins to suffocate me. My parents did not just ignore me. They actively built a massive wall around me to keep me entirely isolated from the only family member who truly loved me. Why, I whisper. A hot tear finally spills over my eyelashes and tracks down my pale cheek. Why would they go through so much trouble to hide a few letters? What could possibly be so dangerous about a piece of paper? Lenora looks directly into my eyes. Her gaze is incredibly sharp and uncompromising. The pieces of the puzzle begin to cut into each other with violent precision. Because the letters are not just emotional sentiments, Gabriella Lenora explains coldly. Your family draining your monthly salary to fund Mason's ridiculous lifestyle is nothing but pocket change. It is just the absolute surface of the theft. The lies your mother told you were never about protecting you from me. They were designed to protect themselves from a massive financial reality. I struggle to pull air into my lungs. What financial reality? Lenora straightens her posture. The temperature in the hospital room seems to drop 10 degrees. The secret your parents are so terrified of hiding is directly tied to a massive estate placed entirely in your name, she says. The money they have been stealing from your bank account is nothing compared to the legacy they have actively kept hidden from you. I stare at the sealed letters, feeling the entire foundation of my existence completely shatter into dust. Lenora delivers the final blow with chilling exactness. You were not just left behind in a hospital, Gabriella. You have been kept in the dark for almost 10 years. Lenora steps closer to the hospital bed. She reaches into her dark leather briefcase and pulls out a thick, heavy manila folder. She places it gently on the rolling tray table right next to the sealed letters. The hospital room feels like a freezing interrogation chamber. I stare at the stack of legal documents and feel a deep, terrifying knot form in my chest. I was not just your grandmother's friend, Lenora begins. Her voice is sharp and precise like a perfectly balanced blade. I was her business partner for over 30 years. We built a real estate portfolio together from absolutely nothing. When her health began to fail, she knew exactly who she was leaving behind. She knew your mother was entirely consumed by greed, and she knew your father was completely spineless. She wanted to protect you from them. Lenora opens the folder. She slides a thick yellow document toward me. It is a legally binding trust agreement. Your grandmother established an irrevocable trust entirely in your name, Lenora explains. I was appointed as the legal trust protector. It was not a billionaire empire. It was practical and incredibly valuable. It contained a fully paid off triplex of rental apartments located in Gulfport. It held a high-yield investment account that generated steady quarterly dividends. And it included a substantial cash reserve specifically designated for your medical emergencies or future business ventures. The entire estate was supposed to be fully transferred into your direct control the exact moment you turned 25 years old. I am 34 years old. The math hits my exhausted brain with the force of a physical blow. 9 years. For 9 entire years, a massive financial safety net existed with my name on it while I was living on cold coffee and cheap crackers, trying to keep my family from drowning. How did I not know, I whisper? My voice is barely functioning. How could they possibly hide 3 apartment buildings and an investment account from me for almost a decade? Lenora flips to the next page in the file. Fraud, Gabriella. Systemic, highly calculated fraud. When you turned 25, your parents filed an extensive petition claiming you were suffering from severe mental instability. They falsified medical summaries. They submitted forged electronic signatures on legal addendums. They legally positioned themselves as the temporary financial custodians of your estate by convincing the junior trustees that you were completely incapable of managing your own life. They changed the mailing addresses on every single tax document and bank statement so the paper trail would route directly to their private post office box instead of your apartment. My hands begin to shake violently. I look down at a printed email correspondence. It shows my mother's email address authorizing a change of address form. I recognize the exact date. It was the same month my mother convinced me to move into a cheaper apartment because she claimed the family was struggling with my father's medical bills. They did not just hide it, Lenora continues mercilessly. They actively drained it. The monthly rental income from those 3 Gulfport apartments never went into your reserve fund. That steady stream of revenue was quietly diverted into a private limited liability company entirely controlled by your mother. The sickening realization washes over me. The money my mother used to bail Mason out of his endless failures was never her money. It was never my father's money. It was my money. That is how Mason secured the expensive downtown studio, Lenora says, tracing a line on a bank statement with her perfectly manicured finger. That is how he afforded the massive down payment on his luxury sport utility vehicle. That rental income is exactly what funded his extravagant digital marketing campaigns and his endless networking dinners. Your parents have been treating your grandmother's legacy as a personal slush fund to finance your brother's entirely fictional career. I press my trembling fingers against my temples. The room is spinning, but it gets worse. Lenora slides another piece of paper across the table. It is a highly detailed commercial credit report printed just 3 days ago. Look at the guarantor section, Lenora instructs quietly. I force my blurry eyes to focus on the black text. Right there under a massive commercial loan application for Mason's new luxury travel startup is my full legal name. I am listed as the primary financial guarantor for a debt load so large it makes my stomach violently heave. I never saw this document. I never signed this application. This is why your mother was standing in the hospital lobby demanding to know when you could hold a pen, Lenora says. Her voice drops to a lethal whisper. The bank required a final verification signature from the guarantor to release the startup funds. Your parents needed you breathing just long enough to secure the loan. They flew to Cancun because the private investor down there needed to see the confident, successful face of the company. They left you bleeding in an intensive care unit because your only actual value to them is your forged signature on a dotted line. The puzzle pieces snap together with a deafening crack. The constant pressure to sign family documents without reading them, the urgent request to just help out temporarily, the way my mother always made sure I felt too guilty and too exhausted to ever ask to see the actual receipts. They were not just begging for my paycheck, they were managing a massive ongoing criminal enterprise right under my nose. Why did you not come to me sooner, I asked desperately. Why did you let them do this to me? Lenora reaches into the very back of the folder. She pulls out a stack of aggressive legal letters printed on heavy corporate letterhead. I tried, Gabriella. I tried for years. But your mother is a master manipulator. Every time I attempted to contact you directly, she fired back with vicious cease and desist orders. She hired aggressive lawyers to threaten me with harassment and extortion lawsuits. She filed police reports claiming I was a dangerous stalker trying to prey on her fragile daughter. She built a fortress of lies around you, and she made sure anyone who tried to breach it was instantly destroyed. I had to wait until you were physically separated from them. I had to wait until the exact moment their greed finally outpaced their caution. Lenora leans slightly closer. The scent of her expensive perfume cuts through the sterile smell of the hospital room. And they finally made their fatal mistake, she whispers. She pulls out one final document. It is a glossy, perfectly bound pitch deck. The exact same presentation Mason is currently using in Cancun to woo his wealthy investors. Open it to page 12, Lenora says. I flip through the thick pages of Mason's fraudulent business plan. I stop on page 12. My breath completely leaves my body. Taking up the entire page are 3 beautiful high-resolution photographs of a stunning waterfront triplex in Gulfport. The exact properties my grandmother bought. The exact properties that legally belong to me. Below the pictures, Mason has printed a bold, arrogant caption detailing his strong family financial backing and solid real estate foundation. He is sitting in a luxury Mexican resort right now using pictures of my stolen inheritance to convince rich men to give him millions of dollars. He does not own a single brick of those buildings. The physical pain in my stomach is entirely gone. It has been completely incinerated by a white-hot, blinding rage. I am suffocating under the sheer crushing weight of the betrayal. My family did not just manipulate my sympathy to siphon away my hard-earned senior auditor salary. They did not just steal my weekends and my sleep and my peace of mind. They reached their greedy hands back into the past and stole the entire future my grandmother carefully built for me. They stole my stability to buy a fake crown for my brother. They left me to die on a cold office floor while they danced on the ashes of my inheritance. I slowly closed the glossy presentation folder. My hands are no longer shaking. The paralyzing shock has entirely evaporated, leaving behind something incredibly cold and remarkably dangerous. I look up at Lenora Price. The woman my mother taught me to fear is the only person in the world handing me a loaded weapon. I take a very slow, deep breath. The hospital room is perfectly silent. I'm finally ready to use it. The blinding rage does not make me scream. It does not make me tear the intravenous lines from my bruised arms or throw my plastic hospital tray across the room. I do not cry anymore. Instead, my brain does exactly what it was trained to do during my long, exhausting hours at the North Harbor Relief Bureau. It compartmentalizes the massive disaster. It isolates the fraudulent data. My racing pulse slowly calms down. My breathing evens out into a steady, calculated rhythm. I transition entirely from being a broken, desperate daughter into being a ruthless senior audit coordinator. I am no longer bleeding out on a dirty office floor. I am standing in the middle of an active crime scene, and I am perfectly ready to bag the evidence. The very first thing I do the next morning is summon the hospital administrator to my room. I legally revoke every single medical proxy and emergency contact listing attached to my file. I remove Lydia Wheeler and Grant Wheeler from my authorized visitor list with immediate effect. I instruct the hospital security desk that if anyone claiming to be my family attempts to call the ward or enter the building, they are to be denied access completely. I change the security passcodes on my personal banking applications and freeze my primary checking account. I methodically sever the digital umbilical cord they have used to monitor and drain my life for over a decade. Later that afternoon, Lenora returns to my room, accompanied by a tall man wearing a sharp navy suit. His name is Reed Fenwick. Lenora introduces him as a private forensic accountant. He does not offer me empty sympathies or useless hospital flowers. He pulls up a chair, opens a sleek silver laptop, and gets straight to work. Reed specializes in unraveling deeply buried financial crimes and exposing corporate embezzlement. He begins mapping the complex web of cash flow moving silently between my late grandmother's, Trust my personal bank accounts, and Mason's newly formed corporate entities. Watching him work is like watching a surgeon dissect a tumor. He builds a comprehensive digital timeline, tracking exactly how my parents illegally funneled my rental dividends into their own private holding accounts just to float my brother's endless failing ventures. I tell Reed I need my personal devices to complete the financial picture. Ivy stops by the hospital during her lunch break carrying my heavy leather work tote. She hugs me tightly and hands over my personal laptop and my recovered cell phone. I immediately log into my oldest email servers. Reed sits beside my bed and shows me how to trace the hidden forwarding rules my mother secretly installed on my accounts years ago. We uncover a massive hidden folder stuffed with thousands of diverted pieces of correspondence. There are dozens of property tax assessments for the real estate I actually own. There are annual insurance renewals for the Gulfport apartments. There are highly aggressive commercial loan notices demanding immediate payment. All of it was systematically filtered out of my primary inbox, so I would never see the paper trail of my own stolen wealth. Reed suggests we file an immediate legal injunction to freeze all of their assets, but I firmly refuse. I know exactly how my parents operate under pressure. If I confront Lydia and Grant right now, while they are enjoying their luxury resort vacation, they will instantly go into a vicious survival mode. They will hire aggressive defense lawyers and start shredding crucial physical documents. People like my mother only make fatal mistakes when they feel entirely comfortable and completely in control of the narrative. They need to believe I am still the weak, compliant daughter lying helpless in a hospital bed waiting for their instructions. I have to keep Lenora and Reed completely hidden from view. I have to play the exact pathetic role they assign to me, so they'll confidently place the tool of their own undoing in my hands. I finally turn my cell phone back on. A massive flood of delayed messages instantly fills the screen. There are 0 messages asking if my bleeding stomach ulcer is healing. There are 0 messages asking if I am in any physical pain. Instead, there is a solid wall of frantic, aggressive text messages from Mason. He is not worried about his older sister. He is panicking because the wealthy Cancun investor ordered a final background check on the startup capital. The bank is legally holding the investment funds hostage until the primary guarantor signs the final verification document. The primary guarantor is me. Mason is aggressively demanding to know exactly when I will be discharged so I can legally bind myself to his massive commercial debt. I type a slow, sluggish reply blaming the heavy pain medication and promising to look at the documents tomorrow morning. A few hours later, my phone buzzes violently with an incoming international call from Mexico. It is my father. Reed immediately signals for me to put the call on speakerphone and presses a small black audio recording device onto the hospital tray. The recording is entirely legal under our state law for the explicit purpose of gathering evidence of ongoing financial fraud. I clear my throat and force my voice to sound incredibly weak and raspy. "Hello?" I whisper softly into the receiver. "Gabriella." My father says briskly. His voice is loud over the background noise of crashing ocean waves and resort music. "You sound terrible. Listen, your mother says you are actively avoiding Mason's messages. This is incredibly selfish of you. We are at a critical juncture here, and the commercial bank needs that final form cleared immediately." I cannot read the legal documents. I lie softly, letting my voice tremble. My head hurts too much. I do not understand why my name is on a commercial loan application. I never agreed to back a corporate debt for Mason's company. My father sighs heavily into the phone. It is the exact same condescending sigh he used to use to make me feel incredibly small and stupid when I was a child. "It is just a minor formality, Gabriella," he snaps impatiently. "Paperwork is just paperwork. Family members sign things for each other all the time. Your mother and I have managed your signatures for years to keep things moving smoothly. Do not make this a difficult situation. Just log into the banking portal and click agree so your brother can secure his future today." He practically confesses to years of systemic forgery in a single annoyed breath. He actually believes he is entirely entitled to my identity and my credit score. He admits to forging my signature without a single ounce of hesitation or guilt. Reed slowly reaches out and stops the recording device. The digital audio file is a flawless piece of highly incriminating legal evidence. I end the phone call without saying another word to my father. I sit in the quiet hospital room and stare at the dark screen of my phone. For my entire adult life, my only defense mechanism against my family was to completely surrender. I would pay the credit card bill and absorb the heavy guilt just to buy a few days of hollow peace. I always thought about running away and changing my name just to escape their suffocating grip. But as I sit in my hospital bed surrounded by forensic accounting maps and recorded criminal confessions, a brand new clarity washes over my entire soul. I am not going to run away. I am not going to quietly cut them off and disappear into the shadows like a victim. I am going to let the absolute truth completely crush them. I am going to destroy their entire fraudulent empire using the exact same legal paperwork they used to keep me chained to the floor. By the 9th day of my confinement in this sterile white box, I am finally able to sit up unassisted. I can manage to walk a few slow, deliberate steps around the perimeter of my recovery room, holding tightly onto the metal bed rail. My physical strength is still a fragile thread, but my mind is a steel trap. The heavy, suffocating fog of blind family loyalty has burned away completely, leaving nothing but sharp, calculating clarity. I am standing by the window looking out at the gray afternoon sky when the heavy door swings open. My parents walk in. They do not knock softly. They do not tiptoe in with worried expressions searching for signs of my recovery. They enter with an aggressive, bustling energy, looking deeply inconvenienced by my continued existence in this building. They are glowing with fresh Mexican sunburns, and they radiate an arrogant confidence that only comes from believing you have completely gotten away with a massive lie for years. My mother, Lydia, strides in first. She is wearing a bright coral designer sundress and holding a massive iced coffee from an expensive airport cafe. She drops her heavy leather tote bag onto the only visitor chair and immediately starts complaining about the logistics of my illness. She does not ask if my stomach is still bleeding. She does not ask if I am afraid or in pain. She crosses her arms and sighs heavily. "The daily billing rate for this room is absolutely ridiculous, Gabriella," she says, shaking her head in disgust. "You look perfectly fine standing there. You need to request an immediate discharge today, because sitting around in a hospital bed for over a week is completely draining our family resources. Plus, we have several urgent legal documents hanging in limbo because you have been entirely unreachable." My father Grant walks in right behind her. He is wearing a crisp white linen shirt and dark sunglasses pushed up into his graying hair. He looks like a man returning from a victorious golf tournament, not a father visiting a child who nearly bled to death on an office floor. He does not even bother to look at my medical monitors. His very first sentence is a cold, sharp demand. "Did you finally check the secure email from your brother's commercial lender?" he asks impatiently. "We have been waiting for over 48 hours for you to simply log in and click a single verification button. The investors in Cancun are getting incredibly restless." A week ago, their combined pressure would have immediately crushed my chest. I would have scrambled to find my cell phone and frantically apologized for ruining their timeline. I would have begged for their forgiveness. But today I feel absolutely nothing but a freezing, absolute detachment. I turn away from the window and face them squarely. I do not shrink into myself. I do not apologize. I keep my posture perfectly straight and my gaze entirely level. "You boarded an international flight to a luxury beach resort while I was bleeding internally inside an intensive care unit," I state. My voice is incredibly calm and completely devoid of the desperate guilt they usually rely on to control me. "So tell me exactly who in this room thinks they still have the absolute right to give me orders right now?" My mother blinks rapidly. The sudden uncharacteristic shift in power throws her completely off balance. She is entirely used to me crumbling into apologies the moment she raises a disappointed eyebrow. But she is a seasoned manipulator, and she quickly recovers to deploy her favorite defensive weapon. She adopts a deeply wounded, long-suffering expression. "You are being entirely too sensitive, Gabriella," she says, using that familiar sickly sweet tone meant to make me feel insane. "You always blow these minor inconveniences way out of proportion just to punish your family for trying to succeed. We were working down there. We were securing your brother's entire future. You are acting like a bitter, jealous child, making everything about yourself when Mason is on the verge of a massive breakthrough." Right on cue, my mother's cell phone rings loudly in the quiet room. It is an incoming video call from Mason. He is sitting at a busy airport departure gate waiting for his return flight to Florida. He looks frantic and deeply sweaty, but it is definitely not because he is worried his older sister almost died. He is panicking because the wealthy Cancun investors are officially demanding final proof of the guarantor assets before they wire the initial startup capital. Mason practically shouts through the tiny phone speaker, demanding to speak to me immediately. My mother steps forward with a triumphant smirk and shoves the bright phone screen directly into my face, expecting me to immediately submit. I do not reach for the phone. I keep my hands calmly folded together. Beneath the edge of my white hospital blanket, my thumb presses down firmly on the screen of my own hidden cell phone, activating the audio recording application exactly as Reed, the forensic accountant, instructed me to do. I look directly into the camera lens at my panicked younger brother. "What exact financial assets did you show the private investors, Mason?" I ask smoothly. My tone is deceptively mild and entirely conversational. "I need to know exactly what family properties you listed on the commercial loan application before I even consider signing my legal name to anything." Mason runs a nervous, shaking hand through his carefully styled hair. He is far too stressed about losing his funding to realize he is walking directly into a trap. I use the Gulfport apartment buildings he blurts out impatiently over the noisy airport background announcements. "The 3 waterfront rental properties. I told the investment board that our family owns those completely free and clear, and that the steady monthly rental revenue guarantees my new business loan." "It is just a minor technicality, Gabriella. The commercial bank just needs the primary guarantor to legally verify the collateral so they can release the funds today. Stop being so incredibly difficult and just sign the electronic form right now so I can board my flight in peace. He admits it openly on a legally recorded line. He freely confesses to using my stolen inheritance to heavily leverage his own corporate fraud. My mother is a very skilled predator, and she instantly senses that the conversation is shifting into highly dangerous territory. She realizes I am pushing for specific financial details instead of just blindly agreeing to take on the debt. She narrows her eyes in suspicion and aggressively lunges forward, reaching out to snatch the phone away from my face to cut off the connection and silence her son. Before Lydia's manicured fingers can even graze the screen, the heavy wooden hospital door pushes open with a sharp, authoritative click. The air in the room instantly turns to solid ice. Lenora Price steps smoothly over the threshold. She is wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit and carrying the thick manila folder containing every single piece of their financial crimes. She does not say a single word. She just stands there radiating absolute authority. My mother freezes mid-lunge. Her hand hangs uselessly in the air, suspended by pure, unadulterated shock. The glowing golden Cancun tan violently drains from her cheeks in a matter of seconds, leaving her looking like a hollow gray ghost. She stares completely paralyzed at the tall, commanding woman standing by the door. The absolute terror blooming in my mother's eyes is magnificent to witness. Her jaw drops slightly. She realizes in one crushing heartbeat that the woman stepping into the light is not just a random hospital visitor checking on my health. Lenora is the only living witness who knows exactly where the bodies are buried. She is the one person on Earth who can completely tear apart the massive fictional story my mother has been telling for the last 10 years. The impenetrable Wheeler family empire of lies just walked directly into a brick wall, and my mother knows the collision is going to be completely fatal. Lenora does not raise her voice. She does not engage in a frantic screaming match with my mother. People who hold all the winning cards never need to shout to make their point. She simply walks past my completely paralyzed parents and carefully opens the thick leather briefcase she brought into the hospital room. She begins laying out the undeniable legal documents across my plastic tray table, like a dealer distributing a lethal hand of cards. Every single piece of paper is a heavy nail being driven directly into their coffin. First comes the stack of thick aged envelopes written in my grandmother's elegant sweeping cursive. Then comes the original irrevocable trust agreement, clearly establishing me as the sole legal beneficiary of the Gulfport rental properties and the high-yield investment accounts. Next, Lenora drops a thick stack of United States Postal Service address redirection forms. They clearly show my mother's blatantly forged signature diverting my critical mail to a private post office box on the other side of town. Finally, she produces the property tax payment histories and the commercial loan applications, placing them side by side. The electronic signatures are entirely mismatched. The forgery is not even slightly sophisticated. It is incredibly sloppy and vastly arrogant. Reed Fenwick was working aggressively behind the scenes while I was recording my father's incriminating phone call. He already submitted an emergency legal petition to completely freeze all outgoing cash transfers from the trust accounts. Every single dollar of the remaining estate is legally locked down tight. But Reed did not stop there. He also sent a formal, highly detailed dispute notice directly to the commercial lending bank handling the massive business loan for Mason's luxury travel startup. The financial fallout is absolutely instantaneous. Over the phone speaker still connected to the noisy airport terminal in Mexico, I hear Mason gasp loudly. His cell phone is buzzing wildly with a rapid succession of frantic emails. The wealthy Cancun investors are cautious men who only care about clean, untraceable money and flashy aesthetics. The absolute second their legal team received an urgent verification request, questioning the actual ownership of the real estate collateral, they backed out entirely. They immediately withdrew their verbal funding agreements and canceled the wire transfers. They want absolutely nothing to do with a chaotic, high-profile family fraud investigation. The protective walls are completely caving in from other directions, too. Lenora calmly informs my parents that the former property management company handling the Gulfport triplex has fully cooperated with our deep forensic audit. The exact moment the property managers realized they might be legally implicated in a massive federal embezzlement scheme, they scrambled to save themselves. They voluntarily handed over 10 full years of historical rental ledgers. More importantly, they surrendered dozens of saved email threads showing my mother explicitly directing the monthly rental revenue to be deposited directly into her own private limited liability company instead of the designated legal trust account. Looking at the undeniable mountain of evidence spread across my bed, a profound, devastating realization settles over me. My parents did not merely steal cash from me. They completely fabricated an entire twisted family identity around this theft. They built a toxic ecosystem where I was treated as an infinite disposable resource, while Mason was treated as a fragile genius who required constant expensive funding. They funded his entire existence using the lifeblood they aggressively drained from my veins. My stolen inheritance was the actual foundation of his entirely fake success. They needed me to feel guilty and exhausted, so I would never have the energy to look behind the curtain. My mother finally snaps out of her frozen shock. Like a desperate, cornered animal, she immediately goes on the highly offensive. She points a trembling, manicured finger directly at my face and starts screaming at the top of her lungs. She calls me a deeply ungrateful, malicious daughter. She loudly accuses Lenora of poisoning my mind and tearing our beautiful, perfect family apart out of pure, jealous spite. Then Lydia tries her most desperate tactic yet. She turns to the open hospital doorway and loudly declares to anyone listening in the hallway that I am suffering from severe mental instability. She claims the massive physical blood loss and the heavy intensive care unit drugs have completely destroyed my grip on reality, making me highly paranoid and totally delusional. Lenora shuts down the pathetic theatrical performance with one single razor-sharp sentence. She does not even blink. If we check the hospital security logs right now, Lydia, they will show exactly who was sitting in the dark hallway protecting this young woman every single night while you were sipping cold margaritas at a luxury beach resort, Lenora states coldly. The medical staff already knows exactly who abandoned her when she was bleeding out. Your sudden performance as a deeply concerned protective mother is completely useless in this building. My father Grant is no longer standing tall. The arrogant, dismissive posture he brought into the room has completely collapsed into a pile of shaking bones. His cell phone chimes loudly with a new marked email notification. It is a formal legal notice from Reed's corporate law firm. The long email clearly outlines the impending civil lawsuits and the highly probable criminal charges for wire fraud, identity theft, and the severe misappropriation of protected trust funds. The freezing, terrifying reality of potential federal prison time finally pierces through his thick, stubborn skull. He looks absolutely terrified. He is sweating profusely, soaking right through his expensive white linen shirt. On the speakerphone, Mason is actively hyperventilating. For the very first time in his entire pampered, shielded life, the bright golden boy aura has completely evaporated into thin air. He finally realizes the absolute devastating truth of his situation. His parents allowed him to build a massive personal brand and a luxury startup company on hard assets he never actually owned. His entire professional identity as a successful entrepreneur is a complete laughable illusion. The wealthy investors are gone forever. The commercial loan is completely dead. He is standing in a foreign airport terminal with absolutely nothing to his name but a shattered ego and a massive mountain of unpaid vendor bills. Please listen to me. Gabriella, my father begs loudly. His deep voice is trembling violently. He takes a cautious step forward with his hands raised in a pathetic, shaking gesture of total surrender. We can definitely fix this right now. We can sit down together as a family and sort out all these minor financial discrepancies privately. There is absolutely no need to involve aggressive lawyers or drag this mess into the public courts. We can handle this quietly just between us. I look at the three of them. I look at my mother trembling with impotent rage. I look at my father practically begging on his knees to save his own skin from prison. I listen to my younger brother sobbing uncontrollably over a lost financial investment. For 10 long, exhaustive years, they demanded that I constantly keep the peace. They demanded that I suffer in complete obedient silence so they could live comfortably and pretend they were successful. They weaponized the very concept of family love to keep me tightly chained to the floor. I reach over with a steady hand and slowly close the thick manila folder. I look directly into my father's terrified, wide eyes. "We are not doing this quietly," I tell him. My voice is as hard and unforgiving as solid granite. "We are not having a private little family meeting in this sterile hospital room. I am taking this entire case directly to an emergency legal hearing. I want every single forged signature and every stolen dollar placed firmly on the permanent public record. I am not going to let them manipulate their way out of this nightmare with sweet words and false promises ever again." The long, miserable era of whispered apologies and hidden bank statements is permanently over. They built a massive, arrogant house of cards directly on top of my stolen life, and I am going to make sure the entire world gets a front row seat to watch it burn straight to the ground. I walked out of that hospital building on my own exact schedule. I did not leave when my mother demanded it, and I certainly did not leave to sign a commercial bank loan. I stayed for 14 full days until my body was actually ready to stand on its own 2 feet. 3 weeks later, I find myself sitting behind a heavy mahogany table in a cold, brightly lit county courtroom. The emergency hearing for the immediate transfer of trust control is finally underway. The air in the room is suffocatingly tense. My mother walks into the courthouse wearing a conservative navy dress. She desperately attempts to project the image of a deeply devoted, heartbroken parent who is simply misunderstood by a rebellious child. She sits next to her heavily perspiring defense lawyer and elegantly dabs her dry eyes with a tissue. She testifies under oath that every financial decision she made was out of pure maternal love to protect her fragile, unstable daughter. She claims our family is completely united and that this entire legal proceeding is just a massive emotional misunderstanding. My legal counsel does not even raise his voice to argue. He simply hands the presiding judge a very thick, heavy binder. He formally introduces the official hospital visitor log. He points out the $20,000 medical receipt paid entirely by a silent third party while my parents were absent. Then he introduces the airline boarding passes time-stamped exactly 4 hours after my emergency surgery. The final absolute blow to her maternal facade is the printed transcript of the frantic text messages my parents sent to my phone. They were aggressively demanding a business signature while I was physically strapped to an intensive care unit heart monitor. The judge looks down at my mother with absolute undisguised disgust. Reed Fenwick takes the witness stand next. The forensic accountant methodically slaughters my parents' remaining defense. He projects a massive financial flowchart onto the large courtroom screen. He formally testifies how the monthly revenue from the 3 Gulfport rental units flowed directly out of my designated estate account and straight into a private limited liability company owned entirely by my mother. From there, Reed traces the stolen funds outward to the exact cent. He highlights the transfers used to purchase Mason's expensive plane tickets, his luxury resort deposits, his high-end studio furniture, and his lavish marketing campaigns. The undeniable math proves my family was operating a massive parasitic financial scheme using my stolen inheritance as their personal treasury. But the absolute most devastating moment of the afternoon belongs to Lenora Price. She steps up to the witness stand and produces a sealed addendum from my late grandmother's original legal file. It is a highly specific supplemental directive. My grandmother knew my parents were deeply greedy people long before I ever did. She secretly embedded a legal poison pill into the trust framework. The clause explicitly states that if I am ever subjected to financial exploitation or coercive abuse by my legal guardians or relatives, Lenora possesses the absolute unilateral authority to trigger an immediate asset clawback. The document grants her the power to instantly freeze all accounts and petition the court to strip my parents of every single ounce of fiduciary power. The final collapse of the Wheeler family happens in absolute silence. My father's aggressive defense attorney practically shrinks into his leather chair as the commercial lending bank officially submits a sworn affidavit confirming the guarantor's signature on Mason's loan application shows blatant signs of deliberate forgery. Grant realizes he is staring directly down the barrel of severe civil lawsuits and potential felony fraud charges. Mason is not even present in the courtroom. He is hiding in his rented apartment, completely humiliated after being forced to publicly admit to his wealthy Cancun investors that he never owned a single brick of the real estate he bragged about. The untouchable golden boy is completely bankrupt in every possible sense of the word. The presiding judge does not waste any time deliberating. The ruling is incredibly swift and absolutely merciless. The court grants an immediate emergency injunction, temporarily transferring full and total control of the trust back to me and Lenora. The judge explicitly authorizes us to change every lock, replace the corrupt property management company, and legally block all future financial transactions initiated by my parents. We do not wait for the ink to dry on the court order. That exact same afternoon, Lenora and I drive straight to the Gulfport waterfront triplex. It is a beautiful, sprawling property with wide porches facing the ocean. It is the solid, secure foundation I should have known about 10 years ago. A professional locksmith arrives and begins loudly drilling out the old hardware under the watchful eye of my attorney. We officially inventory and seal boxes of documents and furniture belonging to my mother's shell company. Every time a new brass lock clicks into place, I feel another heavy chain fall away from my chest. I am standing in the driveway, breathing in the salty ocean air, when a familiar luxury vehicle aggressively pulls up to the curb. My mother leaps out of the driver's seat. Her careful, pristine courtroom composure is entirely gone. Her face is twisted in ugly, desperate rage. She marches across the manicured lawn and screams at me at the top of her lungs. She calls me a vicious monster. She wails that I'm completely destroying our family and ripping our shared lives apart over pieces of paper. She tries to use the exact same heavy guilt that kept me trapped in a cubicle eating dry crackers while she stole my future. I do not flinch. I do not feel a single drop of that old paralyzing guilt. I look at the frantic, sweating woman who spent 10 years treating my actual life like a disposable battery to power her own ego. I walk calmly toward the edge of the grass and look her dead in the eye. No, I tell her. My voice is sharp and completely hollow of any affection or fear. I am not destroying a family. I am just terminating your business model. The absolute silence that follows my words is incredibly beautiful. My mother finally realizes she has absolutely nothing left to sell, and I am no longer buying her lies. She turns around, gets back into her car, and drives away for good. That night I sit alone in the living room of the top-floor apartment. The space is entirely empty except for a single folding chair, but it belongs completely to me. The windows are open, letting in the cool night breeze from the Gulf. I hold the copied hospital visitor log in my lap. I run my fingers over the name Lenora Price, written repeatedly, line after line, night after night. I realize then that true family has absolutely nothing to do with shared blood or the people who demand your endless sacrifice. Family is the person who sits quietly outside the glass door when you are at your absolute weakest, making sure you are safe and refusing to trade that protection for anything in the world. Thank you for listening to this story. Please comment below to let me know where you are listening from so we can interact and share our thoughts. I invite you to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like the video, and support it further by pressing the hype button so the story in this video can be heard by many more people.